beaches always bring it back. I mustn't let it happen again.
Winston.
Good God. I was working.
The Cabinet Office has sent you a new secretary.
It's such an honor to meet you, Mr. Churchill, sir.
Well, there's no need to drop to the floor, my dear. I'm not royalty. General Eisenhower.
Winston?
This will be the greatest campaign by our allied forces. The potential for disaster is too great.
The plans for D-Day have been in place for over a month.
I can't lead this.
You have no choice.
It's as if my experience, my knowledge of warfare count for nothing. The invasion of France must be stopped.
No, sir, you must be stopped.
Do you want to be coddled?
I'd settle for some respect.
Then don't complain when someone tells you the truth.
The army is ready.
Okay, let's go.
Half of those men will be rotting corpses by tomorrow.
That's enough! My fiancé is on one of those ships. I don't want to hear that the man I love may in a few hours be dead. I'm sorry. I have no right.
You have every right. I need your help.
Try acting like a hero, Winston, and then maybe people will believe that you are one.
This is the Prime Minister speaking.
You must give them hope. Make them believe they will win this war.
This great war is fought by ordinary people. This is not a war for glory. It is a war for freedom. When it's all over, what will I be?
You will always be the man who led us through this.
The man, the legend. Mr. Cox, it's an honor to have you on this stage. Thank you for being here.
It's an honor to be here.
Oh, please, don't flatter me.
No, I won't. And I'm not.
Nope. Let's talk about Churchill. This, I don't think we've really seen this version of Churchill on the screen before. A man who's much more vulnerable, who's coming to the end of his career, maybe even his life, and is sort of a bit unsure of where he fits into the puzzle at the moment.
Yeah, he was quite ill towards the end of 1943, which is like 4 or 5 months before this happens. And he was recovering. They think he may have had a heart attack. And he was not happy about the D-Day landings. He felt that they were going to be, well, he felt there was going to be a repeat of his big disaster, which was when he was in the First War. He was First Lord of the Admiralty, and he was responsible for the Dardanelles campaign. Now, I've just come back from Australia, and they're none too pleased with Winston Churchill down there because they lost something like 56,000 men. And it was a disaster. And after that, he went to the front and became a major in the Royal Scots Fusiliers and stayed there for 7 months. But then, years later, he is still plagued by what happened, you know, which is how the film starts.
He's plagued by what happened, but he's also in the midst of a changing world. And the leadership around the world is kind of changing and coming to terms with different things. And he is a bit elderly, and himself, he's a bit slower to come to terms with these things, to recognize them.
Yeah, and he's part of an old guard. He's part of, the world that was before 39, but now we've got the new kids on the block, which is represented by Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Eisenhower's vision is an entirely different vision from any that's been before. And he has the support of Montgomery, and he has the support of most of the Allied forces. And he's out on a limb, interestingly enough, Winston, at this point. And the fact that he's also quite frail, and he's coming up to his 70th birthday, and his confidence is somewhat knocked. And his wife is the kind of rock for his life. And Clementine, who was his wife, she kind of took care of his legacy and made sure that, that the legacy of Winston Churchill remained intact, which is why we never found out until a few years ago about this cruise that he had during Normandy, during the preparations for Normandy. But interestingly enough, the guy who was our military advisor it was the last week of filming, and he suddenly announced much to everybody's surprise, because was always in debate. And he said, yeah, we knew about Churchill's alternative plan. He said, in fact, when I was a student, we put it into a computer for a computer analysis. And I looked at him and I said, so what was the result? And he was a little shamefaced. He said, well, you know, given a few caveats, I mean, well, it looks as if the war might have ended 6 months earlier.
Wow.
So that was a real shock to us, and was a shock because I never knew this, you know, that nobody ever knew this had happened. So that he wasn't entirely wrong, but he didn't have, you know, he was a depressive. He suffered from this thing called black dog. He consumed an extraordinary amount of alcohol. He used to start off the morning with breakfast, which would be champagne, and then he'd have whiskey at lunchtime, mixed with a bottle of claret and a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc, and in the evening we'd have brandy and whatever followed.
Until he woke up on the floor.
Well, yeah, but he never woke up on the floor. This is the other thing. He slept like something about an average of not more and probably less than 4 hours a night. I mean, amazing constitution.
You say that his confidence is kind of rocked in this, but it's not necessarily just his doing. Those that he is surrounded by at the same time have very little confidence in him as well. And there's an extraordinary sequence where he goes to give a speech to soldiers, and he basically learns that it's not his speech to give anymore. No. He doesn't really have it in him. And you even have this almost embarrassing moment where, you know, the people that he's traveling with, just let him look at maps and, you know, make him feel like he's in charge of stuff, and then we'll get him out of your way.
That's right. Well, I think there was an element of that that's true. I mean, a lot of people would dispute it. I mean, you know, we've got some historians back in the UK who do not like this idea of you know, warts and all Churchill, but actually I think it's his flaws that made him the great man that he was. I think he owned everything in his life, and, you know, he wasn't a popular guy for a long, long time. He was very against appeasement, but nobody wanted to go to war, especially after the First World War, and he just knew that there was only going to be one way to stop Hitler. He was also very supportive of Bertie, who became, you know, who is the present Queen's father, who became George VI, becoming the king, the abdication, because we just had the abdication crisis in 36. And nobody wanted that to happen, everybody, because he was a man, as you see the King's speech, he had a terrible stammer and he had problems with it. Jimmy Purefoy gives a beautiful performance, I think, as the king in this. So he was always on the outside looking in, and that was his position in life, and finally he stepped into his destiny, like Mandela, like Napoleon, which was the savior of the UK, you know, the great war leader.
Now, going into a project like this, or going into playing a historical figure, would you have played? Does your interest lie in playing Churchill, or was it when it was proposed to you that it was Churchill at this point in his life? So suddenly you have the vulnerability and the gravitas, and he's not just a hero at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of bit of both. I mean, I'd been involved in another Churchill project about, over 15 years ago. I did a show about Nuremberg, and I played Goering, Reichsmarshal Goering, and interesting, another great historical figure, interesting, a bad guy, but basically quite interesting. So it was proposed that we might do Churchill and Roosevelt, which is a great story between how he persuaded Roosevelt to come into the war. And so I had Churchill, yeah, Churchill was very much in my consciousness. He was, ever since I was a kid, because he was the MP of my hometown. He was the Member of Parliament. I'm, as you can hear, I'm Scottish, and I'm from a place called Dundee, and he was the MP for Dundee. And my uncle Geordie, when I was a bairn, when I was a wee laddie, he used to tell me he told me this story, which is apparently true, that when Churchill was, again, he was on the hustings, he was trying to become the MP, and he had changed parties, which they weren't very happy about. So he was not well, so they brought him in on a sort of chair with kind of wooden oars, like a sedan chair, and he came into the city square, and my uncle, he shouted at these four guys that were carrying, he said, "How much did he pay you?" And the guys turned around and said, "A quid," which is £1. He said, "We'll give you 2 if you drop him." So that's how popular Churchill was.
Can I ask who was going to play? You were going to play Churchill in the Churchill and Roosevelt piece. Who was going to play Roosevelt?
Well, we hadn't got round to it, but it might have been Ed Herman, the late Ed Herman.
I would have loved to have seen. I would love to see now a two-hander between you playing Churchill and someone playing Roosevelt. Just the story of the convincing, the back and forth sounds like incredible.
Everybody thinks Pearl Harbor it was a done deal, but there was more to it than that. Much more to it than that.
Now, we were talking in the green room, and you have a vast array of roles in film and television over the course of your career. How often do you look back? Do you look back on what you've done?
Well, it's a bit scary, when you look back, because it's like climbing a mountain and looking down and having vertigo and go, oh, God, how did I get up here? So there's an element of that. And I'm always surprised, I just come back from Australia, and they did a compilation of stuff that I've done over about 20 years, and I was shocked because we sometimes forget, we forget who we are. I'm a jobbing actor, I'm a working actor, I have been all my life. So I like the job and do the work, but I forget about these guys. I forget about the people who watch the work and like the work. So I'm always shocked when people come up with, their favorite movie that I've been in. And it's kind of humbling in a good way.
What do you find is the usual favorite that people bring up to you?
It varies. You have the Bourne people, Bourne Supremacy, Bourne Identity. Then you have X-Men 2, those people. And then you have the Troy people who love Troy. And then you have the people who like, for example, Super Troopers,
Which,
and here we are,
I've heard that there's a sequel in the...
We've just done
finished.
it. Yeah, we just filmed it. Yeah, we finished in... we finished last year. It was finished in last October, and it's waiting for a release. Unfortunately, I think we've missed the summer, so we'll probably not release it until maybe after Sundance.
Now, I have to say, one of my favorite roles that you did was the original Hannibal Lecter.
Yes.
That you did in Michael Mann's Manhunter.
Right.
Which is, Silence of the Lambs is a beautiful film as well. Manhunter is a completely different piece of work. It's much meaner.
Yeah.
What was it like 5 years after doing that role? Somebody else goes and does that role.
Well, it was it was funny because we had the same agent, Tony Hopkins and I. So it was kind of odd. And my agent rang me up. My English agent was our English agent, a guy called Jeremy Conran. He rang me and he said, "Oh, Brian," he said, "I've just had this offer for Tony in this part." He said, "It sounds very similar to a part you once played." And the character wasn't called Hannibal Lecter. I said, "So what's the character called?" He said, "He's called Quigley." And I thought, well, I don't know anything about Quigley, but apparently at one point there was a great debate about who owned the name Hannibal Lecter. And actually, if you notice, Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter is spelt slightly differently than it's spelt in The Silence of the Lambs. So anyway, it emerged it was going to be Tony, and it was Jonathan Demme who was directing it. Now, I wasn't really bothered because, roles are... Everybody plays Hamlet. Yeah. Everybody's playing Churchill at the moment. I mean, John Lithgow, Gary Oldman, Albert
Hannibal Lecter's a great example.
And Hannibal Lecter, like I did it first. I was there first. But, so other people have played it since, and it's become one of those iconic roles. They've just done this TV series with Mads Mikkelsen. So I'm never possessive. My thing about it is always let go, let go. Just let it go and move on. I'm a great one for... I just believe your next role is your best performance, not the one you've just done.
Did you ever watch those performances and just think like, oh, that's such a different approach to the material?
Well,
because your approach was much more, he's a criminal, he's a brilliant psychotic guy, but I would say, at the risk of sounding pejorative, I think Anthony Hopkins did a beautiful job, but he also presented a campiness to the performance as well, intentionally.
Tony's a great theater animal, and he was fantastic. I had to go to Paris to see Tony play because I couldn't go in London because everybody would go, "What is he doing here?" So I saw it in Paris. And I saw it in Paris, and I loved his performance. But again, it's a different Hannibal Lecter. There's an element of the Grand Guignol in that. My thing was I based my guy on a killer who existed in Scotland in the late 50s. It was this guy called Peter Manuel, who actually conducted his own defense. And he was a tiny guy. He was part Portuguese, born, actually, ironically, in New York, but grew up in Glasgow. And he was really very, very urbane and very, you know, kind of sort of normal, you know, but he was a serial killer. So it was the kind of normality that I wanted to do. I mean, doing, you know, the evil, real evil is something that is so scaringly normal that it becomes really nasty. Whereas when it's, you know, you know, if you're playing, you know, the guy with the long fingers, what's he called, you know? You know, what's he called? You know,
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I can't think of his name.
Robert Englund plays him. Yeah, that character. Yeah, and it's obvious, you know, it's sort of over the top character. But Hannibal Lecter isn't like that. I mean, he's a psychiatrist. You know, I mean, if you see Ted Bundy, for example, those amazing pictures of Ted Bundy, and you hear
Dahmer,
or Dahmer, and you hear them interviewed, there is something so incredibly prosaic about them, which makes them even more scary.
What about when it's not banal and you have an orange spray tan and you're the leader of the free world? I'm kidding. Sorry.
Well, then you know, well that's just sad, and it can only be described as such. You know, I mean, I love De Niro. I mean, I love what De Niro's doing now about the whole thing. You know, how it's all become a horrible comedy. You know, and I think he's right. It has become a horrible comedy, you know, but there's nothing you can do about it. You know, you get what you want, you know, and you got him, he's there, you're stuck with it, you know.
One of my favorite films that you were in is Rushmore, Wes Anderson's second movie.
Well, yeah.
Now, this is an instance where that movie has an incredible resonance for me. I saw it at an age where it stuck with me. I watched it over and over again. And for you, it was probably like a week and a half.
Yeah, if that. Yeah, I think it was about a week and a half. But it was interesting because it was working with Wes, who's such an astonishing director. I mean, he's very gifted. But he's also, and Jason Schwartzman, who was not well during that filming. He was actually ill. I didn't know he was ill. Yeah, but nobody knew how ill Jason was, and he was. But he did everything asked from him. But Wes would do these long takes. And he would shoot a whole magazine on this is when we had film, you know, you'd shoot a whole magazine on Jason, and then he would say to Jason, and say it again, and say it again. And I eventually had to say to Wes, I said, Wes, do you think we can get the scene going? You know, because otherwise it's just going to be, and say it again.
Because he's so specific and
he's very specific. And I understood, you know, I could understand, but the other thing when you're playing with someone, you want to get the tennis going. You know, when you work with a great actress or actor like, I mean, a great actress like Miranda or John, you know, I mean, you want to get the tennis going.
And it's also only his second movie where he was coming from working with friends. He didn't have a...
But he was very confident, you know. I mean, he's also very iconoclastic. I mean, he looks like he comes from an Ivy League background, but in fact, he went to school in Houston. Yeah, you know, he's a Texan. He's part of that great migration of those scientists, and you know, it's very interesting because he kept trying to, you know, and Owen Wilson, who was the co-writer, kept saying, "Oh, Wes, can you not just decide that you're going to film it at St. John's, which is the school you went to, instead of wanting to film in Vermont or even England?" You know, and Wes had all these ideas about maybe we should film it in the west of England. Maybe he just didn't want to film it in Houston.
Now, can you tell that? And this is what interests me about this. You say he's very iconoclastic, and that's what we get when the picture is done. We see that this is iconoclastic. When you're making a movie like that, can you tell that the director has an iconoclastic vision, that it is something much different?
Well, with Wes, it's also he's auteur. You know, he's an auteur director. So you do get it in just the script. You know, the script alone, because it was Owen and Wes both wrote Rushmore, but it's very much Wes's story. We even, as I say, finally we filmed in the school that actually Wes went to, which was a kind of like a strange sort of Ivy League school right in the middle of Houston, Texas, you know, which is a swamp.
One more of your greatest hits, and I apologize for going backwards like this and doing this to you, but I love these films so much. adaptation where you got to play Robert McKee.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Robert McKee after or before the performance?
Robert's a great friend. Yeah. He's a great friend. And
how much embellishment did you do?
You don't have to embellish with Robert. I mean, have you ever done Robert's class?
No.
No, it's a fantastic class. I mean, it's a brilliant. I would advise anybody to do Story, which is Robert McKee's
I love his book.
Screenwriting class, because it's like the longest one-man show ever. You know, it's 3 days of celebration of films, and he ends up with this fantastic variation on Casablanca. I mean, Robert is amazing. I mean, he's absolutely amazing. He's a very sensitive man, too. And I adored playing him, and it was his idea. I mean, they were trying to get Michael Caine. You know, Michael Caine as Robert McKee, it wouldn't quite work, really, would it? No, I don't think so.
So very kind of a suave Robert McKee.
Exactly, kind of odd Robert McKee. So they were trying to get and they thought Michael Caine, and Robert went, I don't think so. And he said, what about this guy Cox? And he'd seen me in a play, and we got talking. And I finally went and met Spike Jonze in the middle of he was living in London, in Trafalgar Square, and there was the fire alarm went off in the middle of the interview, and he was running around. All these firemen suddenly rushed into the building where we were, and it was most bizarre, most odd. But I got the job.
You got the job, and one thing that I always ask someone who comes onto the stage if they worked with him was, what was it like working with Nicolas Cage?
Nick is great. No, he really is.
He's one of my favorite actors.
No, Nick is a truly fantastic actor. I mean, in that adaptation, I think it's the best work he does. Particularly if you watch the scenes where Nick has to play with himself, how he's worked it out and how he does it, the nuance, the changes. He's a fantastically good actor. He's a much better actor than people sometimes give him credit for.
I agree 100%. When he has a director who knows how to sort of, no, I don't even want to say fine-tune, but capture what he's good at.
What he does.
The best of the best.
No, he really is. He's a tremendously good actor.
Now, we're going over all these incredible parts that you've had, and there's many that I've missed in this already. It's a short conversation.
It's
but
too long.
But you say, you're just as good as the next job. So what do you look for when you're looking for the next job, outside of a job?
Well, mainly a job. It's mainly, as my great friend once said, we follow our mercenary calling and draw our wages. And I think that's the great saying for all of us, that, you can't get too heady in this business. You've really got to keep it, you've got to be grounded, otherwise you go nuts. And I just look for the work, the good story, and the setup. I'm going to do a picture now, Strange But True, which I'm going to do with Greg Kinnear, Amy Ryan, and Blythe Danner, which I'm playing opposite, and which is great. And it's a sort of ensemble piece, and it's produced by Fred Berger, who produced La La Land and also produced a movie I did last year called The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Great movie, by the way. That was a great little thriller.
I know. I wish more people could see it, but it's a wonderful movie.
It was a very surprising film. I had to do an interview for it, and I hadn't read anything about it, and I put it on, and like about halfway in it, maybe even sooner, I was like, this is a great horror movie.
Yeah, it's scary. It's very scary. Yeah. We had a great time doing it. Great director. Again, you see the new directors. That's the other thing too, is you're always looking for the guys to develop relationships. I mean, I've been very lucky in working with certain people who I've worked with again. Like Spike, I've worked with twice. Spike Jonze, Wes, I've worked with. I did Fantastic Mr. Fox. So I mean, I like that. I like that development. So it's a great advantage. And Andre Overdahl, who directed Autopsy of Jane Doe, he's a coming man, particularly in the horror genre.
Now, when you look back over the course of your career, I always wonder this when it comes to actors who've done such great work that has been lauded by critics and by audiences, but then has also just done work. Do you have a movie or a part that you put your all into and felt very vulnerable with, but then for whatever reason at the end of the day, it didn't get received the way that you had hoped, or even the film didn't come out the way that you had hoped?
Well, I mean, the problem with that is it's not so much I've done movies which I'm incredibly proud of, but it's getting access to these movies. I mean, the cinema is really difficult because, you get so much stuff thrown at you, particularly with the blockbusters and the various franchises, the DC franchise, the Marvel franchise, and you've got 6 cinemas, 6 screens in a multiplex. You've got 5 of those screens eaten up with all those movies. You've got 1 screen And you've got so many independent movies fighting for that one slot. I did a film last year which still hasn't been seen, and it's a film I'm particularly proud of, which is a film called Akira, which is about an old actor who has Parkinson's disease. But it's a very funny film made by a bunch of Hungarians we filmed in England, and it's a very, very funny film. Nobody's seen it here, you know. They've seen it. We played it at Stony Brook. There's a wonderful film festival at Stony Brook out in Long Island, and we played it there last year, and it was a huge, huge success, standing ovations, everything. So it does gall you that some of your work just doesn't get out there. I mean, there's some work I would prefer not to get out there, but actually, that's not really true. I mean, everything I've done, I've always got something out of. You know, I'm quite Catholic in that way.
Well, I always wonder about that when it comes to these kinds of franchise movies sometimes as well, because obviously fans love franchise movies, but critics don't necessarily care that much about franchise movies. But as an actor, your job is to show up and be vulnerable to the part.
That's right.
You may have done, in your mind, what was your best work or your most transcendent moment was on X-Men 2 or something.
Well, I loved X-Men 2. I mean, it's a brilliantly, because it's Bryan Singer, and he's an extraordinary director, and it's probably one of the most allegorical of those franchises. And it was great to work on. It was a great cast. It was, you know, up in Vancouver. So those kind of movies, I've thrilled. Troy, the Bourne movies. The Bourne movies were great to work on. I've not had a bad time on any of the big blockbusters, as it were. I've enjoyed everything. I'm very lucky in that way. You know.
It's the strangest thing about being an actor that we kind of were talking about before, which is this idea that you can never be too dismissive of the part that you play, but you can never be too invested in the glitz and glamour of the world itself.
You've got to. It's this balancing act. It's a tightrope, you know, between the glitz and the glamour and just being a jobbing actor, just doing the work, but also not forgetting the audience, not forgetting how they feel, what they like, how they've responded. And, you know, in a way, I'm very grateful. The audiences have been very nice to me over the years, you know, because of the work I've done.
You make it very easy to be nice to.
Well, thank you. But it's that balancing act that you've got to do, because you must never believe it. That's the truth of the matter. You must never believe it. And you must always be grateful for the response that you get.
Absolutely. Let's get some response from these guys. Who's got some right there?
Hello.
Hello.
For you getting back into Super Troopers 2, how did it feel to return to that character after 10 years? Can you talk about anything about that movie?
Well, yes, it was fun, except the guys are all much older, and you know, I'm sort of the same age I was, you know, 15 years ago, whenever we made the movie, but the guys are now men in their 40s and coming up to 50s, and they have children, and they have all the... Whereas they were just a bunch of stoners. I mean, you know...
Now they're trying to do, like, dirty fart jokes.
Yeah, they're trying to be, hello, we're, you know... So that's quite sweet and quite touching, and it makes me laugh a lot. But they're great guys, and I'm actually going to be working with Paul Sota, who's he's the blonde one, and I can never remember the character's name, so I can't tell you who he plays, but he's the blonde one. Well, except he's not so blonde now. He was blonde when he was younger. Anyway, he's a very good writer, and we're working on a script together. But they're great guys, and they're very, very... They haven't, you know, they're very in touch with who they are. They're still the Broken Lizard. That's still, you know, they've been together for zonks, nearly 25 years since they were students. And they still, you know, they have their little moments, but on the whole, they're great. You know.
Next question.
Hi, I was just wondering, were there any directors that you haven't worked with yet, but you want to?
Well, yeah, there's a few. I've never worked with Steven Spielberg. I've never worked with Martin Scorsese. So there's kind of, you know, directors like that who I'd be quite happy to work with, if they'd be quite happy to work with me. Who knows? I like working with I like work with directors who are beginning. You know, my greatest excitement is to work with the new guys and the new gals. I mean, I'd like to work with more women, to be honest with you. I would really want to work with more women directors. I haven't worked with nearly enough women directors. And that's where I'd like to, you know, that's what I'd like to do. So in a way, I'm still waiting on that director. But of the old guard, you know, I suppose Spielberg and Scorsese, you can't get much better than them, you know.
The guys.
The guys, yeah, exactly.
Next question.
Hi. So do you prefer to play characters that are like based on historical figures, or do you prefer something that's a little bit more original?
Well, it depends, really. I mean, it's a script. You respond to the script, and if they're examining a character in a particular way, that's what I respond to. So, what I love about historical figures is you're looking at them through your own particular view. So you take them on a journey which is your journey and their journey sort of combined. Of course, you've got more leeway in a fictional character, but they're still equally rewarding. I'm sorry, it's an old-fashioned phrase, but it's horses for courses, really. So I get a thrill out of both. I played a couple of real-life characters. I mean, for instance, Hermann Göring in the Nuremberg, which was because he's a very contentious character because of what happened, with the concentration camps, the Holocaust. So he's an interesting character to just find the right truth about the guy. Because unfortunately, people become bad, but they're not necessarily born bad. That's the truth of life. And so it's interesting to take someone's journey and to see where the flaws come in, where you kind of get led in a particular direction away from who you wanted to be, And that's, for an actor, that's the real joy of the job.
And also, to be bad or evil, for lack of a better word, something else has to be kind of broken in
That's
there.
Right. That's
so
right.
for the actor, I imagine the most fun is to find that thing that is broken.
Absolutely.
And to make sure behind every line, there's a little bit of that break.
Well said. Are you an actor? Did you act?
I think I could be a great actor if I was. No, I'm kidding.
No, but that's very well said. I mean, I think that's exactly right. It's exactly that. It's that you examine, it's clinical, it's detective work. You examine those things that led to that event being the way it does. And interestingly, this film, Strange But True, is exactly about that, about good people who are caught in an event where everything goes wrong.
How often do you find that directors are curious about that research, that work that you've done? Because I know there are some directors who are like, that is the actor's place, that is what they want to do. I don't want to hear about it unless they want to tell me about it.
No, I once worked with a director who shall be nameless. Yeah, he'll be nameless. I was about to name him, but no. Anyway, no, he's okay. But I was doing a film with Tim Roth, who's a wonderful actor, and we were doing this film, Rob Roy, and we were working on this film, and we did a scene, and it was so well written. It was
no longer is this director nameless.
No, that's right. So of course he isn't. Well, I'm sorry about that, Michael. But anyway, you were younger then, so let's let it ride. And I love you now, and you're great. Okay, so.
Sorry.
I know. What a stupid thing. I should have just named him to start with. Anyway. So what happened was he did this thing, and he was very new on this. I think it was his third film or second film, big movie, and he did a good job. But he did say at one time when we were rehearsing, and sometimes directors don't know what to do when we're rehearsing because they're so busy trying to get it. And his passion was silent films, which of course doesn't help when you're doing big dialogue scenes. So anyway, we were doing this, and we were doing something. And we did this scene, Tim and I, and we did it this way, we did it that way. We did about 8 variations on it. And we said, look, we can do it like this, we can do it like that. I said, we can do whatever, And then eventually he said, hang on. He said, you do the acting, and I'll do the directing. And I went, okay, well, now we know where we are. So, I mean, it's funny that, but, directors have all directors have different views about how they present their work. Some directors are very visual, some directors are editors, some directors are brilliant animators. I did a film which I love with a guy called Mike Doherty. And it was a film called, Don't Leave Me Now, Please, was it? It was a horror film. It was called Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat. Trick or Treat. That's a good movie.
Yeah, it is a good movie. And it's a great movie. And he's an animator. He does an animation. And I said to him because I was busy doing something else, and he said, could you do this movie? And I said, yeah, I'd love to, Tim. I said, I tell you what, I really haven't got time to look at it. I said, but what I'll do is, just you tell me I've got an idea what I think the character should look like, but can you just tell me what you want me to do on the day? Like, tell me what you want me to say and tell me what. And it was the most freeing thing I've ever done. So I arrived on the set, and Mike just said, do this, go up those stairs, fall down the stairs, a little crazy, what was he? This homunculus. It was he was a Halloween-headed creature that was chopping people with funny. It was pretty awful. So I said, and he's attacking you now, and I did this whole film like this, and it was such a relief not to come in with a vested interest or a view that I just followed the director's direction. A bit like doing a silent movie, which perhaps if Michael, anyway.
But what about the interior work though? That's what I'm kind of curious about. Is like when directors start asking you about the stuff about like what you found about the character that might be broken, not necessarily the blocking, but like really that personal investigative stuff that you're doing. Do you care to share that? Or?
Well, I do, but sometimes a lot of directors are not interested. You know, they are.
Maybe.
Well, I think every director should learn about acting. My feeling is a director should actually take some acting classes because it's a whole different process for an actor. An actor has to understand the story. He has to understand where he stands in the story, what his view is, what affects him, how he reacts, all kinds of things, which acting teaches you. Now, a lot of directors, that's not their interest. They're not interested in that. But you learn a lot from that. I mean, I teach. I'm a drama teacher apart from anything else. And I know that you learn an enormous amount from understanding the actor's problem. You know, and actors can be a pain in the arse. I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't excuse them. Sometimes they can be very selfish and they bring all the attention to themselves to the exclusion of others. I've been very lucky. I've not found that too often, I have to say. But it's very useful for a director to understand what the process is from an actor. And therefore, it actually allows them to, you know, just be a bit more trusting. For example, I work with Ken Loach, who is a great British director. Now, his style is improvisation. And it's a style which works brilliantly in all his films. The film I did happened to be a film about, it was called Hidden Agenda, and it's about Northern Ireland, and it's about shoot to kill, and it's about a cop trying to find out details, facts. So it's very hard to improvise. And I did it with Franny McDormand, who was wonderful in it. Now, Ken, at the end of the day, he was always suspicious of actors. But I try to point out, I said, you know, we're not all ogres, and we're not all, you know, chances. We just want to do the work, and we want to make the work as truthful as possible. So we can do that thing of improvising and being in the moment. That's what acting's about. That's what good acting is about. And when actors don't do that, they're not doing their job. And he was good. He was great because he kind of recognized it and said, "Okay, this is working." And I think it was the first time that a bona fide actor with a lot of theater credits, which is what I was at that time, worked with him.
What was the process with him like getting to shooting? Because I know, and I think his process is different than Mike Leigh, where Mike Leigh does, you know, like
he prepares,
months.
yeah, and he also prepares the characters, and they all go off and work on the character. No, his thing is immediacy. You know, I mean, for instance, he doesn't like you running your lines. He says, "Oh no, don't do that. Just wait to do it on screen." So he wants all the foibles to come across. He wants all the kind of uncertainties to be there. And it's a legitimate thing.
It's kind of like he has a script, so you get there, do it the way you want to do it, throw the script away, do it, let's figure it out, and then cobble the scene together.
And that's what he does. I mean, that's how he creates that in me. That's why he gets that incredible spontaneity from his performers in his films. And as I say, it's all horses for courses, because each director, you know, some directors are very stylistic. They've got a very clear vision of how the film, and that works too, because that's like wearing a suit that's perfectly made to fit you. You know, you go, wow, this is a good suit. I know what I'm doing. I mean, Spike Lee, for example, is a wonderful director at getting you on the right spot when you sit in a Spike Lee movie, when you're sitting in the right, you know, in the right desk or the right chair or the right bar, and that you're in the right light. You know you're in safe ground because you know that's exactly where you should be.
So you feel that when you're on a Spike Lee?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What is it about that spot? Is it just the way that he has built the whole set around it?
It's just the way he's done it. You know, he is so intuitive about how the setup is in a particular scene. I've never known. He's flawless as far as I'm concerned in that way.
Now, forgive me for not knowing the answer to this, but have you directed?
I have.
You have directed a film?
Not on film, no. I've tried to direct on film, but it takes too long. I mean, I prefer working, you know. I mean, I get bored if I'm having to do it. I can't do all the spieling and all the
fundraising and
all
everything
that
like
stuff
that.
and all that. And I feel sorry for directors. I once produced a film, and I took the script from this writer, now very successful director, Rupert Wyatt. He brought the script called
It's a great movie, his first film.
Yeah, Escapist.
Yeah.
Well, he brought that script to me, and I said to him, I'm locking this away. Because I know that you will get everybody, the world and his wife, will give you notes on your script and try to change your script from the script you wrote. So my job as a producer is to be the protector of the script, to make sure that that is the script that we do and not some kind of endlessly notated script, because everybody will give their notes. And that's the script we did.
It's amazing. It's a great film, too. People should check out The Escapist if you haven't seen it. He went on to direct one of the Planet of the Apes films.
He did the whole revival of the Planet of the
The
Apes.
Gambler. He's great. Well, Brian, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Churchill is coming to theaters. When can people see Churchill?
June 2nd.
June 2nd. That's this Friday.
Yeah.
Go see Churchill. Brian Cox. Brian, thanks so much for being here, sir.
Thank you.